Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session around real-life Microsoft SQL Server modernization stories. My name is Srivan Tattanayaka. I'm a senior partner solution architect at Amazon, focusing around Microsoft technologies. In this session, I like to highlight one of our database modernization partner, OneCloud Hub, who has recently done an amazing database modernization project where they have migrated a large production Microsoft SQL Server to Amazon Aura Postgres using Babelfish. They are here to walk you through all the corner points and the process they went through when they did this modernization project. And it's my pleasure to introduce Ramakrishna Pani, Global Head of Cloud Practices and OneCloud Hub. Over to you, Pani.
Thank you, Sri, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this session. Today, we'll show you how to plan your modernization path so that you can move away from traditional commercial options and use modern database platforms like RDS or Aurora. And you'll save tens and thousands of dollars in this process, avoiding software assurance costs and licensing costs. We'll walk you through the modernization process with a real-world example of a SQL Server to PostgreSQL migration using Babelfish. This is the first of its kind implementation in the world for Babelfish on PostgreSQL Aurora. The customer is one of the largest container shipping businesses in the world, present on every continent and operating in over 160 countries worldwide. This multi-billion-dollar enterprise had recently acquired a large shipping company in Singapore. As part of this acquisition came a massive IT consolidation challenge. AWS was, of course, the platform of choice. The consolidation effort required moving more than 200 applications along with their databases, a third of which were, of course, SQL Server. Now, the customer did a few lift and shift migrations to AWS and quickly realized that the software assurance cost of SQL Server made the entire project cost prohibitive. So they had to find alternatives. They knew that they had to go for open source alternatives, but they did not have enough capacity to take up the modernization challenge and the consolidation at the same time. This, coupled with the fact that many of the applications lacked technical documentation, even a feasibility study was difficult to conduct. So they were looking at a fast, with little or no code changes approach to get into PostgreSQL Aurora. With this challenge in front of us, we began the initial discovery and assessment with app and DB teams to put together a business case for the migration. We started with a conventional approach of using a schema conversion tool. SET, as it says on the tin, has a report that can be run to figure out the compatibility of the source schema on the target schema. And it will do the conversion of the source and target schemas automatically if fully compatible. Now, around this time, Babelfish became generally available in Singapore region. We were aware of this product and its promise to accelerate the migration with little or no code changes and wanted to quickly evaluate its fitment for our use case. So we ran a Compass report, or a compatibility assessment report as it's called. After running the report, we sat down with the application teams to understand their readiness for the migration, discussing topics like upcoming feature updates, application performance expectations, a level of documentation available for testing, and any test automation that was already there. Based on these inputs and the tool reports that we had to make a decision which way to go. We wanted to go with a tool that would meet our performance constraints and showed high compatibility with our use case. Ultimately, the rest of the things being comparable, the promise of little to no code change swung the decision in the favor of Babelfish. Now, the application that was using the database was a .NET application built to be used by the business users to notify port authorities of incoming vessels. The application unfortunately lacked proper documentation or performance benchmarks and had to be a multilingual application, meaning had to support not just English, but local languages as well. So we put together a program plan for the customer, which would ensure safe delivery of value. We began by revalidating the business case, including the run and maintenance cost post-migration. We worked out the tooling to be used during the migration, We, of course, also had to work out the tooling to be used for the performance benchmark and the functional testing. We got the migration to be state architecture signed off by the customer and went on to arrange POC funding by AWS for the migration effort. We completed our migration planning, the test plan, the cutover, and the failback plans. And to begin with, did the UAT migration to de-risk the production migration. We conducted a full round of testing once the UAT migration was completed. And once we got all the functionality working on the PostgreSQL side, we went on to do our first benchmark of performance with the SQL Server and then later with the PostgreSQL as the target. This way, we had a side-by-side comparison to find any issues and fix them immediately. Once the UAT migration was complete and the performance benchmarks done, we took all the learnings that we got from the UAT environment to improve the cutover plan for production. We, of course, also implemented all the same fixes to get the functionality up and running in production, which we then ultimately handed over to the business users for testing. While the users were testing the application, we prepared the system for monitoring, backups, and generally preparing it for day 2 operations. We updated the corresponding standard operating procedures and the playbooks, provided a knowledge transfer back to the application and the managed services team for continued maintenance post-go live. Needless to say, the application migration went smooth, and the application has been running in production for the past 3 months without a hitch. Now, any heterogeneous migration is bound to have its challenges. This is due to the varying levels of compatibility and performance for the same queries on the source and target database engines. The first issue we encountered was the corruption of bare binary data when using DMS for the migration. There were PDF documents that were stored in the database which had to be migrated to PostgreSQL, and we had to find an alternative to DMS. So we got innovative and wrote a small app, basically a few lines of code that queried the PDFs from SQL Server and inserted them into PostgreSQL. We also had a challenge in migrating bulk insert queries, but Babelfish 1.1 now supports this functionality. The original 1.0 which we used didn't. So we bypassed Babelfish to write stored procedures using copy command instead to overcome this.
Good point that you mentioned here, Pani. So it's very important that the customers use the latest version of Babelfish because some of these issues are already fixed in the latest version of Babelfish. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely, Shri. And Babelfish team is continuously updating the product. In fact, now we are in version 1.2 as we record this session. So use the latest version. A lot more functionality is being supported as we speak. So now the application, remember, was a multilingual application, meaning it had to support local languages. So during testing, we basically started having garbage characters being displayed on the front end wherever the local languages were used. We traced the problem back to an unsupported collation on PostgreSQL side and had to rewrite those stored procedures with the native collation on PostgreSQL. And finally, we had to rewrite pretty much all the queries on and stored procedures that were using self-join on PostgreSQL to address performance issues there.
So some of these self-join issues may already be fixed in the new version of Babelfish. So make sure that you always get the latest version of Babelfish.
Absolutely. So having overcome all these challenges, we were finally able to deliver cost savings of over $21,000 year on year for this customer with this database alone. We also saw an improvement in performance for over 70% of the queries post-migration. Babelfish and DMS, of course, did a lot of the heavy lifting, which made this possible to deliver the project in quick time for the customer. Now, looking back at this experience and other since, there were, of course, a few things that we could have improved on. Firstly, it is very easy to fixate on a like-to-like solution. What I mean by this is that we need to look at the current and future scenarios of data that may include use cases like search functionality, reporting functionality, or hierarchical data usage, and so on and so forth. Now, RDBMS may not be the right target for some of these use cases, so be open to options. Next, don't base the migration just on the TCO or the DB feasibility alone. It is easy to tunnel vision and forget the application that is using the database. So it is very important to consult and bring the application team early into the conversation. Maybe the application is being planned for a sunset. Maybe the application lacks a ORM implementation. And if it does, then the entire business case would be on its head. I said it earlier, but heterogeneous migrations will always have surprises. We enjoyed a great working relationship with this customer, but we still had a few close calls. Most projects will have daily or weekly cadence calls. Apart from this, have a channel open with the customer teams where you can communicate issues and the steps that you need to take to remediate them, especially when things start going sideways. In our case, the customer team actually came out of the way to help us fixing some issues and also doing additional testing to get the project back on track. So very crucial to communicate and work as a single team, as a single unit. And again, remember that the application is a multilingual application. So the multilingual challenge that I spoke about earlier, it came up during the final user testing before go live. Basically, days before go live, there were garbage characters showing up on the user screens. And luckily, we figured out the early fix, got the application up and running in a couple of days. But we could have easily avoided this if we had been using real data with the local languages for our testing early on, or at least if we had brought in the business users earlier in the testing phase. So use live data for your testing. And finally, agree on a performance benchmark with the business users ahead of time. This will save you a lot of time during the testing.
This is great, Pani. You shed a lot of light around how these real life modernization projects works. I'd like to ask a few questions around some challenges that you faced. So you mentioned that you faced some issues when you try to migrate via binary data. So in that approach, did you thought of like using, let's say, an Amazon S3 bucket and put all the files there, and then refer to them using some kind of an ID in your database, or did you directly go for storing the data in the database itself?
Yeah, so luckily the database var binary data was not so large that we had to take it into S3 as a buffer to buffer before bringing it into the PostgreSQL side. What we ended up doing was writing a few lines of code that would handle two types of scenarios. One was the bulk insert or bulk update of data, the one-time data transfer. And the second was, this is a learning again from the UAT that we did, to basically take the Delta data and bring it into PostgreSQL side to enable us to minimize the downtime required for the production cutover. So luckily, as I said, the data set was small enough that we needed to be fast enough. So we used the local host to bring all the data and then push it into PostgreSQL side, not really going through S3 as a buffer.
That's great. The other question is around the performance. So in a real life projects, the way that you do testing may be different from the way that you do testing in a, let's say, in a pet project. Do you want to shed some light how you went about to set the benchmark for your production data and how you tested your baseline and how you compared it to the actual results that you got after doing the modernization?
Absolutely. Now, a couple of things had to be addressed with this. As I mentioned earlier, this particular instance did not have a performance benchmark established with the business users. So it's very crucial to have that page latency or page load time as a metric defined and the user experience expected defined with the business users. So that's step one that we did. And as will be the case with a lot of migrations, you will need to create a like-to-like environment to figure out any slow running queries without network noise. So what we did was set up an environment in the same VPC. On one side, SQL Server on RDS, and on the other side, PostgreSQL Babelfish on Aurora in the same VPC. Had the application server connect to both of these environments and generated load from the application server, first pointed it to the SQL Server side, then finally did another round of testing to replicate the same scenarios on PostgreSQL side, identified the queries that were running slower on the PostgreSQL side to tune them for performance. We then finally also replicated a real world scenario using JMeter, where we recorded the page load times of all the pages in the application, hitting both the SQL Server and the PostgreSQL side. So that's essentially how we covered the performance testing on this particular instance.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see how you have compared the real world use cases rather than doing some hypothetical one. You actually compare the page load time, that's the user's experience rather than the hypothetical number, right? So that's very interesting to know how you did that. So going back to, like, given the fact that you guys are doing some amazing database modernization, do you want to tell a bit of a story about OneCloud Hub and the kind of competencies and the skills you have in this space?
Absolutely, Shri. So as a company, we are present in 3 markets now, and we are opening up the UAE market this quarter. We are now more than 250 people strong and have been recognized as the best tech brand in 2021 by Economic Times in India. Since its inception, we have always been focused on learning and certifications. We now have over 125 certified cloud architects, DevOps engineers, cloud engineers, and other specialties on our team. We achieved an advanced tier partnership with AWS in a record time of 6 months since its inception, since the company inception. We have, of course, continued this trend and went on to participate in various service delivery and competency programs with AWS, like the Well Architected program and, of course, the database migration delivery program.
That's amazing how you have built your AWS practice over time. So let's say a customer wants to engage you and they are not sure about the application. They want to do some kind of an assessment. What's the engagement look like in this kind of a database modernization project? Do you want to shed some light around your engagement model around database modernization?
Absolutely, absolutely, Shri. So if a customer is interested in planning their modernization path with OneCloud Hub, we conduct a free 3-day workshop to understand their business needs and goals with the migration. We will run a couple of reports, of course, the SCP and the Compass reports to figure out compatibility of tooling for their use case. And then we will conduct workshops during the 3 days with the application team to understand or assess the readiness of the application for migration. We'll, of course, summarize all of this into a report with the business use case, solution options, and any possible funding options from AWS to conduct the migration. So that's essentially the way to go to figure out readiness for the migration with OneCloud Hub. Yeah.
This is very interesting because now you can decide before you even start the project how complex this migration is going to look like, simply because you can now analyze the application with the help of Babelfish, Compass reports, and all the other artifacts that you are producing. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely, Shri. This will give us a very good insight of how much of the migration will be automatic using Babelfish or SCP as may be the case, and also give us areas where we need to actually do some manual work to get the application functionality up and running. So gives a good idea of the cost and the timelines apart from just the feasibility or the complexity of migration. So definitely important tools to have before making the decision.
For those who are watching this video, you may be wondering where I should start Microsoft SQL modernization journey with Babelfish. The best way to learn Babelfish is to get your hands dirty and do a real-world app modernization. To assist with that, we have an amazing Babelfish app modernization workshop. You can run it within a few hours, and we will provide you with an AWS instructor and free AWS lab accounts to try the hands-on labs. During the workshop, you can bring your existing database schema, run a Babelfish Compass assessment to check the compatibility and the complexity of your migration. As Pani said, this is a great starting point to assess the risk and put a project plan. You can also use our database modernization partners like OneCloud Hub, who can assist in this journey. Most of them provide free assessment to their customers in their engagements. Once you have a solid project plan, feel free to reach out to AWS, and there are some attractive proof of concept funding available to accelerate your modernization. Feel free to check out the description of this video for more information. This is an amazing story, Pani. I really like your story. So a customer, let's say, who wants to be in contact with you to go through this kind of an assessment, how can they reach out to you?
We, of course, can go to onecloudhub.com or write to us at contact us at onecloudhub or call us at any of the numbers seen on the screen.
Thanks a lot, Pahani, for this session. I learned a lot from your explanation around Babelfish and how these real life projects are running. So if any of you are interested in contacting OneCloud Hub to get your database modernized, feel free to reach out to them using this contact number. Thanks a lot, Pahani, for joining this session and in giving your wisdom around database modernization. Hope you all enjoy this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri.